All right, we're all here. Thanks, folks, for hanging out with us as we begin to wind down what I have thought has been an incredible 2.5 days of learning, connecting, and I hope, as we'll do in this panel, a little bit more sharing and perhaps exploring and seeding some ideas for some of our future conversations, which I know will come out of the time that we've spent together here in Pittsburgh. My name's Chad Evans. We've met. I've got an incredible panel here. You see their names and their titles. It's an incredible global representation spanning universities, national laboratories in the United States, incredible clinicians, and as well as real estate developers, people who actually build life science clusters around the United States and the world. So they're the experts. And gentlemen, I'm going to just start out with each of you. I will ask you to please give us your name and where you're from, but I really want you to focus on this first question. We've spent now 2 days thinking about the experiences here in Pittsburgh around place-based, or as I might say, place-making innovation. You'll see that that's the title actually of this panel. I think you've heard a lot. I think you've probably picked up on some things that perhaps were unexpected, some lessons learned. I'd love to hear from each of you what has struck you from the conversations from your peers over the past 48 hours. Maybe it was something new. Maybe it's just something that resonated with you. Or maybe you didn't hear something that you thought you would, and you're a little bit surprised you didn't. So, Steve, maybe I'll start with you. You're right next to me, so you get to go.
All right. Well, I'm Steve Ashby. I'm a Senior Vice President with Battelle as of 3 weeks. 3 weeks ago, as a Director of Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, which is one of the national laboratories managed by Battelle, which is the world's largest R&D operator. So I would say 2 words struck me as I was listening over the last couple of days about what I saw in Pittsburgh, but more generally what I think is a lesson for all of us. The 2 words are intentionality and alignment. Pittsburgh didn't happen to meander along some random path to the future that we're celebrating today. From its past in steelmaking, heavy industry, to where it is today in healthcare, robotics, and AI, in manufacturing, it was intentional. It sought out and designed a path forward to the future and pursued it with vigor. Second was alignment. Was it had that vision of where we wanted to go? What you heard over and over again, and we heard it from the individuals on the campuses, the companies involved, all the way up to the governor. There was alignment of the various players in this ecosystem. So those are the 2 things I would take away from this, Chad.
Thanks, Steve. Willie, what about you?
Well, for me, I'm Willie May, VP for Research at Morgan State University, although spent most of my career at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST.
As the director.
Actually followed Pat Gallagher there as director. My one word would be wow.
Yeah.
Just wow. Yeah, I've been totally impressed with how Pitt and Carnegie Mellon have led the regional transformation from a older, steel-based economy to a high-tech economy, focusing on AI and related technologies. Truly impressed.
Awesome. Josh, please.
Yeah, thank you. Josh Parker, I'm the CEO at Ancora. We are a investment manager providing capital to universities around the country. And I think my takeaway, sort of the advantage that I see in this market, and I agree very much with what Steve and Willie have said thus far, but energy comes to mind. We heard about this region and this state being a net exporter of energy, and we heard the governor talk about an all-of-the-above energy strategy. And I think what he was talking about was carbon versus non-carbon forms of energy. But I think beyond those forms of energy, the human energy that exists here is pretty incredible, and that alignment I think is important and comes to mind. The energy behind the initiatives and the alignment behind the initiatives, I think, is what can help this region accelerate into this next economic future.
Miguel, you're going to share a little bit more, I know, some of the experiences that you've been leading in Portugal, and we've the GFCC community has been a beneficiary of some of the work that you and your team have been leading at Católica. But please introduce yourself, and I'd love to hear what your takeaways have been from the past 2 days.
Okay. Miguel Ataíde Marques. I'm a vice rector of Universidade Católica in Portugal, and also I'm a professor of business and economics. It was an interesting gathering here because we were at the very center of what I have been following with the GFCC in terms of understanding the drivers of placemaking innovation, creating wealth at the local level. And we actually dived into a vibrant city with 2 world-class universities. And this is a very interesting case for placemaking innovation and the role that universities play in the development of the city. If we move from the city into the state level, and we had Governor of Pennsylvania before lunch, then we can see 2 large cities which are drivers of growth for the state. We also have 2 very large and other universities in Philadelphia, Penn State, University of Pennsylvania, the famous Wharton Business School. And so we are moving from the city level into the state level. If we were in Europe, we were moving from the city level into the country level. And then you have the United States. And when you come to the United States, is overwhelming size. There is nothing compared to it. Its size and dimension. And if we look at Europe and the European Union in particular, which is a comparable economy in terms of GDP, the big difference is that you have integration here in driving growth, whereas in Europe we have a lot of fragmentation still, and that's what makes the difference.
Yeah, thank you. So Mark, you know, one of our competitiveness conversations that preceded our time here in Pittsburgh bridged Indiana and Illinois. Oh. You're leading major efforts in Illinois, both as a dean of a college, you're a CEO leading a major healthcare organization. You've heard a little bit from those perspectives from peers and colleagues here, so I'd love to hear your thoughts, reflections, and what mattered to you over the past few days.
Yeah, my reflection is that it's the best of times, it's the worst of times. And so the amount of energy, again, people coming from all sorts of experiences and lenses to which they look at innovation, AI, and health, it's been amazing. We're at an inflection point where artificial intelligence is transforming the world. And it's transforming healthcare. You talk about hype cycles. I think you got to believe the hype in this case. And so it's miraculous. And couple this with advances in cell-based therapeutics, CRISPR-Cas9 editing of the genome, engineering solutions. We saw exemplars of this last night before dinner. I mean, just Pittsburgh is one of the epicenters of this kind of work. And so we need this. This is more than just a gradual improvement in our ability to affect health. It's a step function. But we need it because we are facing challenges that are also equally remarkable, I believe. We may forget it, we just came out of a pandemic, a generational calamity. At least in the US, we're dealing with a generational reckoning around race in our country. Another big deal. At the same time, we have a transformation, a disruption of our government. And no matter where you fall in the political spectrum, this disruption is a threat to our normal understanding of how higher education works, how healthcare works. And these are headwinds for us making the progress in innovation. So I only mention the bad, the worst of times, not because I want to bring the conference down, but because it just accentuates how important it is to get it right. And that's a challenge I think we all face, is how do we work efficiently and effectively to bring the innovations that are possible to fruition. You know, one of my favorite sayings, I think it's Henry Ford, you know, aspiration without execution is just hallucination. So how do we turn these great ideas, these aspirational ideas, into real action?
You know, Mark, as you were talking about the turbulence and the transformations, it reminded me of the title of our latest report at the Council, which is Competing in the Next Economy in an Era of Disruption and Discontinuity. And so it is all about the opportunity space, but it's in a very turbulent ecosystem. So we'll come back to some of that. Damon, take us to the opposite side of the world, to the Pacific, to New Zealand. What's been your reaction coming here to Pittsburgh?
Oh, hi, Damon Salesa. I'm Vice Chancellor, which is the archaic way of saying President of the Auckland University of Technology in Auckland, Aotearoa, New Zealand. And it's been great to have that kind of moment of contrast coming here. You do often fixate on the things that you don't have. And one of the observations in that sense you see in Pittsburgh is this, deep and very generous environment of philanthropy. In New Zealand, we couldn't imagine a philanthropic organisation giving with the generosity that we've seen the Carnegie and Mellons give to the universities. So that leaves me with a spirit of envy. But in terms of the things we have in New Zealand where we could do better, the thing that particularly struck me was in a country like New Zealand, which has 8 universities, which are all public universities, we do not have the level of collaboration that you see here between Carnegie Mellon and Pitt. And so I've been reflecting on how you get these deep collaborations that actually lead to this enormous public good in a thriving city and region. And just thinking, what is that bit missing? And just noticing how the differentiation between the two universities, one has the med, one has the tech. Of course they have a bit of both, but how that's led to a kind of circle of virtue for the city of Pittsburgh and southwestern Pennsylvania.
Let's stay on that sort of virtuous cycle for a bit, and I'm going to open it up now and anyone can chime in. I want to have some reflections from each of you. You're leaders. So you reflected on, you've experienced Pittsburgh over the past 48 hours, but you're also deeply embedded in your own communities. You're driving, I'm sure, incredible innovation outcomes in your own way. So I'd love to hear from each of you, what do you think you are doing, or your colleagues or your stakeholder community in your own space, in your own place, that is making a difference? Because what I'd like to do is to pull out some of the things that are working for you, see if there's any commonality here in Pittsburgh, and if there's not, maybe some cross-sharing that can occur. So I don't know if anyone wants to jump in first. Steve, your hand went up.
All right. So I'll speak to it from the perspective of national labs. There's 17 national labs spread around the country. I had the pleasure and privilege of leading one for 10 years. And although we think of the national labs from that first word in the title, a national laboratory, they're also very much engines for innovation and economic development in their regions, in their communities. And we see that for each of the national labs we have that DOE manages for the country. I think one of the things what we've seen there, Chad, is that the national labs look at how they can catalyze some of the same sort of stakeholder communities around some of the strengths of that region and unique capabilities of the national laboratory. And one of the advantages we have is that we can bring federal funding along with regional, let's say state funding, entrepreneurs, academics, others together to create some interesting things that can happen. So 2 examples real quick. One from my own former laboratory, Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, really leveraged the intellectual leadership and strength of the Northwest in terms of clean energy, in particular grid resilience. Working with utilities, vendors that support the utilities, the work of the National Laboratory, to really look at what it would take to engineer and work with the private sector, which owns our grid, to innovate and modernize that grid to be more resilient and reliable as we move forward and realize that all of the above energy strategy. And so it leveraged a lot of the federal funding coming into PNNL at the time, working with academia, joint institutes, things like that, but also working with industry. And several of these technologies moved all the way out and have saved ratepayers hundreds of millions of dollars, not just in the Pacific Northwest, but around the country as we work to take those there. The other example is in Oak Ridge, which when you look at what they've done with the carbon manufacturing center they have there, a lot of work they're doing in additive manufacturing. It's remarkable what Oak Ridge National Laboratory, the University of Tennessee, the Power Administration there have all done to really create a hub for manufacturing, advanced manufacturing in Tennessee. And it's really brought a lot of wealth and jobs to that region. And there it was leveraging material strengths coming out of Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And there's many other examples at each of the labs, but there it was that purpose of being intentional and collaborative and aligning everybody behind a common shared outcome.
You know, Steve, I remember Deborah and I had the privilege of attending the opening of the Carbon Fiber Center at Oak Ridge. And I think what struck me is a little bit what I experienced here between Governor Shapiro, Chancellor Gable, and others leaders. It's that high-level leadership commitment. I remember when the director of Oak Ridge, opened that center, the governor was there. The 2 members of Congress were there. Senators were there. I mean, it was a big physical and sort of, they came. They made time. And, of course, they're cutting checks and they're allocating money. But it's also about we're going to make this happen because the future of this valley in Tennessee is going to depend on our ability to make a material that will transform the future of manufacturing. And that really, and I have to also say, having visited you all at PNL, I remember very distinctly thinking that I had walked onto the Star Trek Enterprise bridge for the smart grid surveillance system. I mean, it's just unbelievable the kinds of user facilities that the national labs are able to create. And I think a lot of people don't realize the scale and scope of some of what happens at these labs.
Yeah, if you haven't visited a national lab, you should, and you've got one right here in your neighborhood. So take advantage of NETL. It's one of the 17 national labs. So get out and see them. It's amazing. And you're right. We do enjoy the support of our political delegations, bipartisan support. There's only 17 national labs, and we do amazing things for the American taxpayer.
Who's next? Who wants to go?
Chad, I wanted to pick back up on Damon's point about collaboration, because what I think he's right. There's a lot going on and a lot to be proud of. But I was intrigued not only the stories that were being told over the course of the last several days about collaboration in the region, but I always listen to sort of what's not being said. And I think my observation about this region compared to some of the others that we've been to and seen and talked about is the collaboration here has been a collaboration out of necessity, right? The economy across the state was decimated, and the only way to sort of bring that back was to sort of begin networking these resources. But it's a collaboration of I do this and you do that, and we'll collaborate together. And I think the opportunity is to accelerate that collaboration, and I'll borrow from Donde Plowman, our friend in Tennessee, who I think coined the term radical collaboration, talking about some of the things they've done in Tennessee with Vanderbilt and UT and the automotive industry and others, where they really set an ambition that frightened people to begin with. And they weren't worried about who was getting the credit. They were all willing to take on more risk than they had taken on in the past.
But the audacity was there. And
it was audacious, and it was aggressive, and it was radical to a lot of people. And I think that type of collaboration is what really starts to unlock the opportunities that we're looking for. If you talk about stemming the tide of outmigration, and you talk about networking advanced technologies, it's not enough to just hope that engineers and scientists will come together and collaborate. Like, we've really got to be ambitious and aggressive about how we ferment and drive that collaboration. And so I think that's probably the biggest takeaway I had, is listening to collaboration, which everyone's very proud of. It still feels to me like a collaboration of necessity rather than a collaboration to expand opportunity.
Gentlemen, anyone else want to jump in? Damon, you want to respond?
Yeah, I mean, one of the great contrasts we see in New Zealand, there is a deep contest over place. So most, particularly between the indigenous people and an indigenous economy, and what's often seen as a settler economy. And within that contest over what place means, I think it does draw your attention how people can share place, but not share space. Mm-hmm. And unless we deliver a truly inclusive vision of innovation and transformation, we do amplify those differences. So one of the striking comments I heard, which drove at the heart of that, was actually from the Microsoft guy, saying unless equity and inclusion is a design feature, it will not work as a tack-on. And I think that's a driving insight that as we face this, we can forget that there are people who haven't gone through the last two
Yes.
innovations, whole communities, and they occupy our place. And you know, I used to work at the University of Michigan, and if you imagine the city of Detroit as the kind of embodiment of how people share a place but not a space, and there's deep differences in access and opportunities to innovate and access to that next cycle of innovation. And so I think one of the things we have to focus on, and universities should be drivers of inclusion, business has a deep commitment to it, and government, of course, is supposed to be driven by it, is to put that at the very center of our placemaking and our innovation.
Yeah, I think that chord struck very strongly here, hearing leaders committing to, we're not about shuffling people, we have to integrate and engage in this innovation economy. Miguel, I think you wanted to jump in?
Yep. I cannot resist the temptation to bring here a framework which helps us in relating what we are discussing here and what we have been discussing over the past 2 days. And especially relevant to the topic of this panel, placemaking wealth or placemaking innovation. And I'm referring to the Nobel Prize for Economic Sciences, which was disclosed, announced last week. And for the first time, we have this topic of placemaking innovation at the very center of economics theory and practice. The GFCC and the US Competitive Council has been working on this as somehow being pioneering in bringing this to reflection, to study. But there are models that come from academia. And these models have been disclosed last week. Actually, these three laureates help us in understand how to assess and how to deploy resources in order to produce growth, and not even growth, how to sustain that growth.
Yes.
Joel Mopier, who is a professor at Northwestern University, is an economic historian, and he brings us, the centuries of evidence of how technology change creates wealth. Yes. And what are the circumstances that this creation of wealth is not a spurt, but it is sustained. And it is the basis for a new level of wealth. And then we had another two academics, Philippe, I'm not going to bother you with the names, but these two that share half of the price with Mopier, they actually introduced the theory of creative destruction. And the theory of creative destruction is relatively known. Basically, it tells us that new technologies, new ideas displace old technologies because the new are better, and this creates, this spurs innovation through loss. Then it comes to cities, and it's very interesting to find out what are the findings of this research regarding cities, regarding place-making innovation. What are the minimum levels that are required for being able to create wealth? But I'll leave that for another intervention.
Well, I think there are many things to unpack from the incredible awarding last week that you just referred to, but this introduction into now standard literature that creative destruction creates churn, and it links back to what Damon was saying. We have to find ways for adjustment and support for people who are caught up in innovation churn. For sure, new wealth creation is going to happen, new job creation. We believe that from innovation. But we also have to have, I think, a social contract that supports our citizens through those incredibly disruptive times. But Willie, I don't know if you or Mark want to jump in. Willie, do you want to?
I'll jump in a second. I've been stricken by the similarities between Pittsburgh and Baltimore.
Oh, okay.
We're both cities on the water, pretty much. We've both been designated as a federal tech hub. focusing on biotechnology, like Pittsburgh with your two great institutions. We have a number also, Hopkins, the University of Maryland, Baltimore, the University of Maryland College Park, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and Morgan State University. So I've been really amazed by the similarities of our region. And I'll admit, there's a lot that we can learn from Pittsburgh. And we'll be keeping our eyes on you and hoping that you can join us in Baltimore and Washington in the spring and begin to share some of your secret sauce with us.
Yeah, Willie, thank you for, well, first for making that reflection. You know, we've been talking about, and we'll share this in just a second, about Baltimore a lot recently and about College Park, Maryland. But that had not clicked in my brain. But maybe sometimes things happen for a reason. So folks, Dr. May is right. Our next competitiveness conversation on the books will take place on the Morgan State University campus in Baltimore on March 29th, and then we will transition on March 30th to College Park, to the University of Maryland. So both President Wilson, along with Dr. May, and Daryl Pines, Dr. Daryl Pines at the University of Maryland, will be co-hosting us. And the topic will be very similar to what we have here, the future of AI, quantum, and I'm sure as you've just unpacked, I think there's a bio angle we need to discuss too.
Yeah.
Mark, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I might jump in to make a couple of points about place. And so I live in Chicago. Chicago is a big place compared to some of the other cities. 6 significant universities, 5 academic medical centers, 2 national labs. There's a lot happening. You know, we've heard a little bit about customers here a bit. I don't call them customers, I call them patients. So I still take care of patients. And I think understanding the people who reside in the place becomes quite important as we decide to design ecosystems. I'll tell you something about our place. If you go downtown Chicago, a place called Streeterville, the average life expectancy is 90 years old. If you go 10 miles to the south side of Chicago, 60 years old. 3 decades of difference in life expectancy in a first world country is unconscionable. And the determinants of that state of health, 20% of those determinants happen within the 4 walls of our hospitals or clinics. The rest is determined by everything that's happening around them. Lack of access to good food, gun violence, poor education, low socioeconomic status. I think that the interface between health and all these other social determinants of health are quite important. And certainly AI and technology can affect those other areas as well. I would argue there's a responsibility for us to consider the broader ramifications of what we're doing, and not just around health, the health care, I would say, but the health more broadly. We have patients who can't really conceive about having a wearable in their home because they don't have Wi-Fi. They actually, in many cases, don't have homes. That's a different innovation ecosystem, and I would challenge us to think about how do you innovate within that ecosystem to serve a broader set of the population. More to say, but perhaps I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mark. We're coming down to the wire here. We got the flashing clock of doom in front of us. I say doom because I don't want the conversation to end. I think we've only just begun, and we've had a great 2 days. But we are going to come to a conclusion. And I want to ask each of you, as you leave here, and let's pretend we're going to come back in 5 years and we're going to have this panel again. And we're going to spend 2 days prior re-examining or examining a new Pittsburgh. What would you want to leave our colleagues here today with? A single note, an exhortation, an idea that you think from your experiences in your own reality might help Pittsburgh. I think we've learned a lot about what we can take from Pittsburgh that can help us, but maybe we can also give back a little bit here at the end. What would you advise leaders here to spend a little more time on, and how could we maybe as a community then rally around and help? Anyone want to jump in on that? Damon, I saw, and then Miguel.
Okay. Yeah, I come from a place that's both big and small. It's small if you look at it as an island. Actually, if you look at it as we see ourselves, a large ocean nation, we are half the size, 4.5 million square kilometres. What worries me in this moment is when I hear people in the United States talk about the world, and they're really talking about one other country, and the relationships with the rest of the world are a function of that relationship. So I invite people to remind themselves of the true width and breadth and depth of the world, and to think about the way we go forward if we are truly inclusive and looking to transform the world.
I love it. Miguel, you want to go next?
To answer your question, Chaz, it is the case study method, which is a lot used in the business schools where I teach. We had a case study in Lisbon last July, organized by you and the GFCC. And we have tried to understand why Lisbon has positioned itself worldwide as a place for innovation, a place for attraction of professionals. I also come from a very small place, Portugal. We are 11 million inhabitants, but we somehow were able to overcome that kind of difficulty by being part of the European Union and of the Eurozone, which helps a lot. But, you know, the evidence is attraction of professionals from all over the world. Many of you would have perhaps friends or relatives that have moved to Lisbon. Attraction of students, 75% of the students in my business school at master's level are from outside Portugal. 24% are Germans, 17% are Brazilian, 11% are Italian, and then come other nationalities, 35 nationalities. So attraction of students as well. And also the natural conditions, geographic conditions. Portugal is in the middle between the US and the rest of Europe, being the most western country crossing the North Atlantic, so that helps.
Yep.
And also culture, safety, cost of living, which is comparatively low. So all these factors contribute. Now,
Okay. We're out of time, Miguel. I'm sorry.
All right.
Just
Okay.
one idea.
One idea.
That's it.
So this
10
idea, this reality, as being able to be worked towards taking advantage of those conditions,
Yep. Okay.
playing down the disadvantages, and create engine which grows, you know, sometimes not as fast as we wished, but it grows. This has to do with infrastructure. This has to do with regulation. I mean, inviting conditions for people to come.
Great.
And this has also to do with the role played by institutions, by the universities, and by the government.
Great.
Or
Thank
the
you,
local
Miguel.
administration, to finish the 3 pillars that the president of Carnegie Mellon University expressed here many times. The success of Pittsburgh, to him, is the combination of academia, institutions, and business and government.
Great.
And the same happens in our case. This is absolutely crucial.
Okay. Thank you, Miguel. Who wants to go next? Mark, Josh, Mark?
I'll go quick because I know
Okay.
Steve has drink tickets at the hotel lobby. Then I don't want to stand between him and cocktail hour. I'll just say an exhortation. I think if we came back in 5 years, that the University of Pittsburgh and its friends down the road at Carnegie Mellon have the unique opportunity to seize the narrative on the role of higher education in our society, particularly as it comes to the importance of anchoring innovation ecosystems and driving the type of transformation we're talking about. I was struck by just a couple of things. The discussion around augmented intelligence and the need for students to come out of college not only maturing and being seasoned as citizens, but understanding what the AI can do so that they can go directly into the workforce, because they're not going to get that junior knowledge transfer. And so higher ed, for their undergraduate population, it's got a big role to play. Higher ed has a big role to play in driving the debate around immigration and its importance in this country. You know, Pennsylvania had 35% immigrants in 1900, less than 9% now. Immigrants make up the majority of our graduate student population across the country. These universities can seize the narrative around that. And finally, this idea in driving transformation in an ecosystem like this, creating the environment where we're enabling and encouraging failure and rewarding people who get up and try again. I think coming back in 5 years, seeing the University of Pittsburgh and its leaders and Carnegie Mellon University and its leaders having seized the narrative and positioned higher ed as the future of our economy.
Mark, and then Willie, and then Steve.
I'll be very brief, which is to say, much like we do in Chicago, shed your Midwest humility. Talk about what you're doing. You have something very, very special happening here between University of Pittsburgh, Carnegie Mellon, and philanthropy and business. Seize upon that. Talk about it. Let others learn from you. And again, be less humble about it. Everyone should know about what's happening here.
Ditto. Refine and keep doing, bottle it, and keep doing what you're doing and bottle it. It really seems to be working.
I'll build on that point and say, just continue what you're doing. Don't be as humble. And I would say the lesson for others is what you're seeing here in Pittsburgh is a persistent engagement of stakeholders around a shared outcome and respecting the cultural differences of the institutions and the people within that stakeholder community.
Thank you, panel. You've been all about ideas, intention, integration. Thank you, Pittsburgh. Thank you, panel.